Did you sleep with Jill? Were you with her? These questions from my wife Laura were not a complete surprise. I wondered for months when they would arise. It would seem that I should have been better prepared to answer them, and indeed, I thought of all the possible ways to answer them, as well as all the excuses and rationalizations. Tempting as it was, I could tell I was having one of those age-related meltdowns that happen on certain special birthdays, ending in 5 or 0. On this occasion, I turned 60. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I've had an age crisis every year since I turned 16. I didn't plan to use this as an excuse for my relationship with Jill. All other excuses were complicated. Laura and I were married for about 10 years. This was my third marriage and her second. We both had children and grandchildren from previous spouses, and I, in one case, even from a friend. Between our various marriages, we lived with other people, and even when I was married previously, I had special friends for long periods of time with whom I had intimate relationships. At first, I felt bad about my infidelity, but over time I realized that no one person could provide me with everything I needed in a relationship in terms of mind, body, and spirit. I defined myself by this trinity and always thought of my relationships as being connected in these 3 areas, and there were multiple dimensions to each of them. I was a spiritual person, so the concept came easily to me, and I lived it every day. I also recognized my high sexual appetite, coupled with the fact that the women I married were somehow on the opposite end of that spectrum. I thought my 3 wives were pretty obvious cases of bait and switch, a lot of wild and crazy sex during the courtship and on the honeymoon, and then gradually everything sexual or physical practically ceased to exist in our relationship. It seems like I was ready for an outside relationship for many reasons. I met Jill about 3 years ago. She was 40, married, no children, and cute as a button. I resisted her charms for almost a year, and this ultimately worked to our advantage. We became friends, really good friends. And since she had a lot of free time and I was semi-retired, we ended up on the same city committee to build a new library for our rapidly growing city, and were also able to just meet regularly for coffee and talk. We were in North Carolina, near Chapel Hill, and it soon became known that we were heading a library committee. Every contractor within a 100-mile radius wanted to meet with us, present plans, and get the inside scoop. Our friendship blossomed during long design sessions as we reviewed requirements, suggestions, and specifications from hundreds of people in response to a survey we sent out throughout the city. We were given city funds to hire an architect, so we also spent many hours with a small firm that helped us along the way. There were, of course, some basic requirements, and then some nice-to-have options that we could use depending on what the city fathers ultimately decided was our final budget. In our frequent meetings during the first year, Jill and I found that we could talk about anything, and we did. After we quickly completed our work on the library, we just talked about everything. We learned each other's story and then lifted the veil that we often hide behind in front of most people. I opened up to her and she opened up to me. I fell in love and so did Jill. Our connection blossomed because we became so close mentally and spiritually. All we were missing by the end of the first year was a physical relationship. On several occasions, we both carefully expressed our disappointment with our spouses and their lack of physicality. We both tried for a long time not to use it as a stepping stone into the bedroom. This topic was just one of many things we talked about. Having said that, you might expect that I stopped loving Laura, but that's not the case. To add potential awkwardness to the situation, as soon as I became friends with Jill, so did Laura. Jill's husband, Tom, was not absent from our friendship either. Laura and Jill would go shopping or do girly things together. If the 3 of us were going out, I might go off to do some errands, or errands for an hour or 2, only to return home to find 2 women chatting incessantly. One day, Jill and I found ourselves on her living room couch with the architect's plans for a new library and rulers laid out on the coffee table in front of us. Suddenly, the library faded into the background. We kissed, but it was a kiss different from all the previous ones we shared. One kiss led to another, and then the clothes were scattered around, and then we consummated the love that had grown between us right there on her living room couch. I have never experienced such an intense connection with anyone in my life. I was hesitant to think about the term soulmate, but in those first moments as we connected in all dimensions of mind, body, and spirit, I wondered if I was wrong, that perhaps in the universe of love there really was such a thing, and I just connected with mine. Jill apparently felt the same way. As we lay there catching our breath, I asked Jill, "When did you understand?" I felt her smile on my chest as she hugged me. She kissed my skin again. "Almost the day we met. I told you I haven't slept with my husband for the past 6 years. He's older, but that's no excuse. You're older than him, and you just turned me inside out and... I don't know. How can I say this? But I have never felt as close to anyone as I do now with you." She continued, "My husband just isn't interested in me or sex. I dried up years ago anyway. I thought that was my lot. I even wondered if it was premature menopause. Are you okay with what we did? Oh, more than that. This is the best moment of my life, and I hope it continues. One of the things about ignoring my husband is not only the lack of physical contact, but it also takes a toll psychologically. I have a therapist with whom I communicate regularly. I have been in analysis on and off for many years. I lost all my self-esteem when Tom turned his back on me. If the person you love and who said he loves you suddenly stops paying attention to you, you suddenly become a bad person in every possible aspect. You make up stories about everything that is wrong with you, that drove your spouse away from you. You are not sure why, but you know you should have done something wrong or have a character trait that suddenly became visible and became the ultimate turnoff for your partner. It was terrible. Every day I cried for years, and then you came into my life and gave me a smile that told me that you loved me unconditionally. I came home that day and cried, not because of the losses that I experienced, but because you found me and obviously saw value in me. I was floating in the air because after that meeting where we met, you came up to me and invited me to coffee the next day. Everything you did since then, it confirmed my importance and sent me loving feelings. You are my dreamy lover." I watched as a tear rolled down Jill's cheek. She said, "Oh, Jim, in the last hour you've pulled me even further out of that deep, long-term depression that Tom got me into. I feel like I'm on cloud 9, like I'm manic, except I'm not manic. I'm in love again with someone I know loves me." Jill pressed my body against hers. "Do you still love Tom?" I asked cautiously, almost afraid of the answer. "Yes, of course, although after what I just said, you might think not. Do you still love Laura?" "Yes. I feel like the love I'm capable of holding inside has only increased 100 times because of you. I can give more to everyone I meet. I feel like I'm floating on a cloud of love." "Me too. Tom has his faults, but I still love and care for him. I think I'm like you. I just discovered I can love 2 men at the same time." We kissed, and I asked, "What now?" Jill laughed. "I'm hoping for round 2. She kissed me, loading the kiss with a lot of tongue. Well, this will definitely cap the absolute best day ever. After we made love for the first time, we suddenly developed an insatiable thirst for physical contact with each other. We both found it difficult to be in a committee meeting with someone else without wanting to just step aside and make passionate, crazy love to each other. We started making time to be together in intimate ways, making love and just being there for each other. I couldn't help but compare the 2 women I loved, not in an attempt to choose one over the other, but because together they formed a wholeness in my life, and I admired how they complemented each other. Laura was 5 years younger than me. She had a hard time going through menopause, and one of the results was a loss of desire. Her interest in sex, cuddling, touching, and related topics was virtually nil, and when she did go for it, I could tell she was doing it to me because she felt she had to, not because she wanted to. I could tell when something was forced, and with her, any action other than pleasant and stimulating conversation felt forced. Making love to me in any way became a tedious task. Laura was beautiful, a tall, strikingly beautiful brunette. She was athletic, enjoyed hiking, skiing, and balanced this with a strong interest in music, including singing in two different folk groups that sang semi-professionally and performed regularly in concert, plus yoga, meditation, and a love of reading nonfiction. One of her music groups released a CD that sold quite well, and it was a big boost to her self-esteem. She also had two sons, both early in their careers, but with successful starts. One was married and had one child, which Laura loved to take care of whenever the opportunity arose. Laura loved games, especially board games or card games like bridge, games that had complex and orderly rules if you wanted to succeed. She had a keen mind and seemed to be able to remember every card she played, a trait that put me at a distinct disadvantage if I played against her. Laura's career was academically focused, starting as a faculty member, then department chair, then assistant dean, and then academic dean at Tidson College, just a few miles from our home in another suburb of the Research Triangle. She often taught economics or political science, rational subjects, as she called them. But as her career peaked, she became increasingly involved in continually updating the curriculum and coordinating those changes with national college accrediting agencies. Unfortunately, these institutions moved at glacial speed compared to the economy and social institutions that were now moving at the speed of light via the internet. So she had to be persistent and effective in lobbying for change. Jill was a pixie, an overworked, hyperactive, passionate, creative, and willing to try anything else. I was afraid that she would fly away in the wind, and that always gave me a reason to hold on to her when she was around, and we were together in a place that allowed me to have that luxury, even in a calm environment. She loved, and even craved, physical contact with me. The more kisses I could rain down on her, the better. The more I touched her in private places, especially in public places where we could get caught, the better. The more we made love, the better. And the more suggestions I could introduce into our love sessions, at least up to a certain limit, the better. She was willing to try almost anything. Jill was 20 years younger, standing exactly 5 feet tall and weighing less than 100 pounds. She looked slim, even curvy for her small size, with attention-grabbing legs connected to well-proportioned hips and a cute little ass that caught your attention as she walked away from you, especially if she was wearing tight shorts or a bikini, like she did in the summer. Besides her petite size, she had a striking face, a cheerful nose, and a pleasant mouth, angular cheeks, and large round eyes that smiled at her happiness to everyone around her, all surrounded by long brown hair that she often wore in a ponytail or styled in some way, in a mysterious way, making her so sexy. Laura's personality was rooted in intellectual aspirations, sometimes of a serious nature. She often campaigned for the environment, clean water, women's rights, and other similar causes. Jill had a wonderful sense of humor, loved to laugh, and enjoyed creating fantasies and discussing all the possibilities in the world. She had a long-term illness that put her out of action when others were starting their careers, and then married Tom, who wanted her to be a housewife rather than a career woman. She did art, volunteer work, wrote poetry and a couple of novels. Growing up and going to school, due to her small stature, she was given the nickname Pixie, and it stayed that way. She loved the meaning of flirtatious cuteness and magic that the name implied. The general impression of Jill was that she was a cute sex bomb, a small, hot body that could do almost anything and potentially already had. She had a philosophy in this regard: talk little and keep a good deal of mystery about yourself. Pixie had an unusual personality. She was a secretive rebel, carefully figuring out what was considered normal, and then doing things to skirt the edges of that norm. So Laura's questions hung in the air as I looked at her with a slight smile, partly because it took her so long to read the tea leaves and cookie crumbs. Her tone was businesslike, almost as if she was asking if I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch. "Did you sleep with Jill? Were you with her?" I gave an evasive answer after careful consideration. Jill and I have discovered a unique and growing intimacy with each other, the kind of intimacy that we have found and that I need in my life. We have a lot of common ground in mind, body, and spirit, and it's not to the detriment of our relationship or marriage, just she fills in some gaps and I really care about her. Where are the spaces? Laura's voice suddenly took on that irritated tone. I indirectly answered yes to both of her questions. I gave a measured answer. No one person can be everything that another person needs or wants, which is why we are social beings and why we go out into the world and interact with many other people in many different ways. I know that I am not filling all your needs, and I bless you for going out and doing music and other hobbies with your friends. I wouldn't even mind if you also found someone with whom you felt a special closeness, the same way I feel towards Jill. But you shouldn't cling to another woman. I interrupted. When we met and you found out about me, and in all the years that you knew me before our wedding, and many times since then, I reminded you that I always had several intimate friends at the same time, even when I've been married before. I need an external companion, a woman with whom I can be completely open, just as I am open with you. Why, I don't know. But as far as Jill is concerned with us, I'm not acting against my character. It's normal for me. I paused and continued. I'm not trying to make you angry or ruin our marriage or hers. I remain in love with you and care about you very much. Jill loves her husband. I don't think I've changed in the way we interact or express our affection for each other. On the contrary, my interactions with Jill energize me. She is younger and inspires me to look at things from a new angle. If anything, I think you are benefiting from my relationship with Jill. Instead of a 60-year-old who fades into the decline of years, you remain the wife of a lively and energetic man who continues to open up to new people in new ways. I added in a more specific and serious tone, thinking about our absent sex life. I have made the necessary adaptations to your preferences for physical contact and intimacy, as well as adjusting to the time you spend away on your various clubs, groups, and hobbies. I do not blame you in any of this. Don't act any differently in relation to my intimate relationship with Jill. I felt bad when I said this. I've complained to Laura so many times about our lack of physical connection that I've lost count, only to hear back, "But that's who I am." Well, now karma is completely back. I filled this important gap in my life. She, on the other hand, expected me to become a eunuch because she decided she didn't like sex or much physical contact. Nothing was offered to me to alleviate the situation. I always thought it was quite selfish of her, and even told her about it more than once. Laura was unhappy with my statements, and made all sorts of angry noises and clicks. But I long ago decided to remain silent on this issue. Sex was my #1 priority in life, but more importantly, I needed Jill in my life. However, I didn't want this situation to become a choice between two options or some kind of ultimatum. At that moment, I felt that Laura would lose, and I didn't want that to happen. I wanted a win for all parties, perhaps not with optimal happiness, but with some satisfaction in the outcome. I've already made a lot of concessions by not spending every waking hour with Jill despite my inclination to do so. She felt the same. Laura looked at me gloomily. Let me think about it some more. In the meantime, just make sure you don't use her in any way. Laura walked out of my home office with a dark cloud hanging over her head. I decided to leave her alone and let her decide when we might need to discuss this situation further. I deliberately blew air towards the door as she left the room, supposedly blowing the last of the dark energy she was projecting out of the room. Around the time I met Jill, I began taking notes on a novel that told the story of two family dynasties in Old Carolina, a saga with many twists and turns set against a backdrop of real-life events from the Civil War to the present day. The story had to span over 100 years, focus on developing great characters, and push the boundaries of every major character in the story. I had a fairly complete outline of the story, extensive notes, and began writing random sections when inspiration struck, and as I learned writing techniques from some previous courses. I had never written anything other than technical reports for work, so this new hobby and transition to fiction required a mental shift. Over time, I realized that I needed outside help to hone my new writing skills. I took 1 or 2 courses and then became even more interested. Jill had already written and self-published 2 books and wanted to write a new book that was more polished and ready for a wider audience. Consequently, we both began attending various writing workshops in the Chapel Hill area. After several evening or one-day workshops, we both enthusiastically decided to sign up for a 5-day writing workshop at the Hazelwood Institute near Asheville that would last all week and end on Saturday morning. We were both looking forward to our time together, and I was sure that we would not only be engrossed in the seminars, but also spend a lot of time naked and in bed, making love to each other. I expressed my passion to Jill, and she smiled and said she loved the sound of the whole week of workshop and sex. She liked the idea so much that she proved it to me by jumping on me. I told Laura that I had signed up for the workshop and invited her to join me. Part of me really wanted her to be there, despite how it would limit my tete-a-tete with Jill. Laura refused, citing the full calendar for that week. So I revealed that Jill would be going too and said that I thought Tom should come over for the weekend too, and we could go hiking and explore the beautiful mountains of the state before returning home on Sunday evening. Laura was unhappy. The wrinkle that appeared on her face foreshadowed a sudden squall at sea that could capsize even the strongest boat. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, no doubt imagining exactly what Jill and I were already thinking about, which was some serious love time for 2. Finally, Laura said, "Let me see what I can arrange for that weekend, and I'll call Tom to see if the 2 of us can go to your place together." The wrinkle was still there, but at least the nuclear explosion that could have happened didn't happen. I wondered if my wife had a huge reservoir of kinetic energy building up inside her that would explode at some inopportune moment. I crossed my fingers and stuck to my guns. As usual, I updated Jill on Laura's brief discussion and mood. Since we were all friends and neighbors and saw each other socially, I thought some transparency might help keep things calm and diffuse some of the kinetic energy. At least Jill and I had the same stories. Tom remained almost monotonously focused on his business. He and his partner were running a new hedge fund, and they were determined to make the fund a huge success. Things were going pretty well for them so far, but he was working 80 or 90 hours a week, which didn't leave much time for anything other than eating and sleeping, and certainly not paying much attention to Jill. To our surprise, Laura informed me 2 days later that she and Tom would be visiting us either Friday evening or Saturday morning, and that, weather permitting, we would go camping and relax at a beautiful resort hotel and conference center. She smiled and seemed happy at the prospect of joining Jill and I at Hazelwood, even commenting positively on what we would learn at the writer's workshop. I listened carefully to make sure there was no hidden sarcasm in her words, but I didn't hear it. A couple of weeks later, late on a Sunday afternoon, Jill and I arrived in Hazelwood and checked in. We were lucky with our reservation and got a 2-room suite with a living room in the middle. 15 minutes later, Jill and I found ourselves naked in the middle of my bed. Jill was moaning loudly enough that I was worried that other guests at the center might hear us. The old hotel was not well soundproofed. I had mixed feelings about this. My ego thought it would be pretty cool if others knew that this 60-year-old man wasn't so old that he couldn't pleasure a 40-year-old beauty to the point where she couldn't control her vocalizations. On the other hand, I didn't want to ruin our reputation, especially with people who would probably have to sit in a circle with and discuss different writing techniques, problems, and critique each other's work. 45 minutes later, Jill and I came downstairs, freshly washed and probably sporting the same look on our faces that we'd just made love to. We were just in time for the last call for dinner. Even at dinner, I could feel the sexual energy between us and knew that my batteries were quickly recharging so we could have one more love-making session before bed in each other's arms. From Monday to Friday, we established a routine. Wake up, make love, breakfast, morning class, lunch, afternoon workshop, late evening lovemaking, dinner, socialize with other workshop participants in the Hazelwood Lounge, then return to our room to make love. I couldn't remember when I was happier or more in love. Some other workshop participants commented on what a happy couple we seemed to be. Either Jill or I simply thanked them and wondered what they would say when our spouses came to reclaim their rights to us. I did not care. I thoroughly enjoyed the fact that people saw Jill and I as a unit, a couple, lovers, and writing partners. We did nothing to dissuade them from the idea that we were all we had in an intimate relationship. I talked to Laura every day around or right after dinner. Our conversations were what I called functional. Descriptions of classes and workshops, stories about the progress of Laura's singing groups, and preparations for the seasonal concert, discussions of the house and small problems, discussions about the mail that came home, and other things that did not carry an emotional load. Tom and Laura arrived around 10 o'clock on Saturday morning while Jill and I were at the last workshop meeting. Laura waved at the classroom door and I smiled and waved back, as did Jill. I was preparing for some kind of confrontation. The night before, as we had all week, Jill and I slept together. On purpose, in the morning, we did nothing to change the way we left the room. Only one bed showed rumpled sheets and blankets, as it had every morning since we arrived. Although we could have smoothed out the second bed to make it look like it had been slept in, we didn't. Jill suggested it, but I told her, "No, I don't want to live in secrecy when it comes to you." She simply nodded in agreement. I think this was the turning point. I knew that Laura and Tom had both left their luggage in the suite. I also knew that Laura was observant enough to notice the bed situation, which gave away our sleeping arrangements. I'd already admitted it, plus hinted at our week together, so it shouldn't have been news. When our seminar ended at lunch, everyone left the seminar room either for lunch or to pack their things and leave. We stayed one more night. Tom and Laura met us. I shook Tom's hand and gave Laura a warm kiss in greeting, as well as a few warm and sincere words about how much I missed her. Laura was cheerful, briefly recounted the trip from our home near Chapel Hill to the convention center with Tom, engaged Tom and Jill in our conversation, and then we all went to the common dining room for lunch. After lunch, we changed into suitable clothing and set out for a walk along one of the many nature trails that run through the extensive grounds of the Holiday Center. Tom and I led the way, up and down hills and through forest paths, often laughing and commenting on how different this was from our usual sedentary existence. Behind us, I heard women having similar conversations, while listening for any challenging or questioning statements from Laura. I was sure Jill was also feeling the tension of a potentially awkward conversation in her mind. Nothing happened. 6 miles later, through forest trails, visiting several waterfalls and crossing gorgeous streams, we returned to the recreation center just before dinner time. Each couple went to freshen up. I noticed that while we were out of the room, the maids cleaned the bathroom and remade the bed. On the not-so-subtle side, Laura walked out of the bathroom holding a pink toothbrush. She said in a casual tone, "Oh, Jill must have left it here. I'll give it back to her." She immediately left the bedroom, spotted Jill in the family room, and handed her the toothbrush without much fanfare. It was simply the return of a potentially lost item by one person to another, without any judgment attached to the action. Laura returned, and I tried to ignore the situation, but inside, I was both pricking and laughing behind my neutral facade. It stung because the presence of the toothbrush indicated a level of intimacy far greater than mere words, and combined with the rumpled bed, only confirmed what I knew were her guesses about our behavior. After all, I never answered yes or no to her questions. It made me laugh because such a simple action was so commonplace. I also wondered about Tom's reaction to what was happening. He saw the toothbrush being passed around in the living room, but barely glanced up from the papers he was reading in his open briefcase. If he noticed the one-bed-used situation, he did not react. When I walked into the living room, the conversation just continued. Apparently, nothing was wrong in anyone's thoughts. Dinner was a chatty affair, and 2 other couples who were at the workshop joined us at the long communal table. Perhaps it was my imagination, but I thought 4 other people had taken a few extra minutes to draw the right connecting lines between Tom, Jill, Laura, and me. There was only one line before dinner, and it connected Jill and me quite firmly. I'm sure we made things difficult because Jill was sitting next to me and Tom and Laura sat opposite us on the other side of the long table. After dinner, we sat in the Hazelwood lounge and chatted, making plans for a hike to a remote lake on Sunday, and then the drive back home. Two other couples we were dining with decided to join us for a hike and picnic, and I felt somewhat relieved because I was confident that complaints and confrontations would not continue or start with the presence of relative strangers. When we got ready for bed in the bedroom, we walked around naked as usual, since that's how I usually sleep. I knew that at any moment I would hear some mention of the past week, and I was not disappointed. Laura said, in a business-like tone, "It turns out that you and Jill slept together." I nodded, starting to brush my teeth. Added one word, "Yes." "Was it as good as you expected?" "Better, actually." After a long pause, Laura said, "Are we okay? Give me some comfort or tell me the truth." I put down my toothbrush and went over to hug Laura. He kissed the tip of her nose. She was still dressed, so here I was, standing like Adam, hugging my fully clothed wife. It seemed to me that perhaps she was ready to run away into the mountains if I said something wrong. I said, "Wife, we're fine. We're going strong and nothing has changed between us or should change." Jill and I had a good time and hit it off on many levels, plus doing all that writing stuff. It's been a great week. Now don't worry about anything, because nothing else is happening. Laura carefully studied my face, trying to penetrate not only into my eyes, but also into the very depths of my soul through these portals. She whispered, "Thank you." She kissed me quite passionately and then pushed me towards the bathroom, along with a light slap on my ass to tell me to hurry up. She said, "Hurry up there. I always need more time, and I'm tired after our hike and thinking about all this." When Laura eventually came to bed, I extended my arms so that she would press herself against me. She was in her pajamas, as usual. In a rare gesture, she pressed herself against me, allowing me to spoon after her, even though it was clear she was not inviting sex. She asked, "Have you worn these clothes to bed all week?" "Yes." "What did Jill wear?" "The same." A long silence, and then, "Oh, okay." There seemed to be no disappointment in her voice, just an acceptance of a small fact, as if she had asked me if we both drank orange juice for breakfast and I said yes, and then she said, "Oh, okay." The fact that we made love was inevitable. The jury would unanimously agree. I stopped trying to read anything else into this short exchange, but waited for other questions. They didn't follow through, and we eventually fell asleep to the sound of the wind in the Carolina pines just outside our bedroom window. Sunday passed as normally as could be expected. We got up, woke up Tom and Jill, got dressed, had breakfast, packed a picnic lunch, met up with other couples, and then headed out for the long hike to Silver Lake and back. We had lunch, including a paper cup of white wine, while admiring the view of the picturesque lake. Late evening back at Hazelwood, we packed up, split up in pairs with our partners, and then began the journey home. Once we got onto Interstate 40 heading east, I decided to take the initiative. I asked Laura, "Are you okay? I know this is a weird weekend." Laura thought about it and said, "I'm trying to come to terms with this. Am I happy because of this? Not really. I'm a little jealous, but then I realized that we haven't had the kind of sexual relationship you wanted for the last 5 years or so. I'm glad you don't hide it any more than you probably did. I like knowing, even if I don't like the outcome." I commented carefully, "I would be very unhappy without Jill in my life. I would also be very unhappy without you in my life. I say this, but this is not a competition or a baking contest." "Thank you. Just keep telling me things like that. It will help me get over it and reach some level of acceptance. I'm not that far off. I promise not to pester you too much." No, I objected. "This is unusual, and we're adapting as we go. If you have anything that's bothering you, well, other than the obvious, please bring it up and let's see if we can work through it." Talking about it will defuse the situation, and I'm sure it will make you feel better. After a minute, Laura said, "Okay, one question then. Are you comparing the two of us?" I laughed out loud, and Laura seemed a little offended. "Laura, darling, no, I don't compare. And yes, I do. We all compare and evaluate everything we do from minute to minute, but I absolutely do not compare the two of you. Base it on a list of personality traits and the way you do things, like kissing or hugging or something. Absolutely not. Trust me, I'm not trying to rank you on some secret list of things in my head." "Okay, I'm just worried. I mean, Jill is 15 years younger than me. She's younger, and I think she's also prettier. And oh damn, I'm going to cry." I reached out my hand and placed it on Laura's neck and shoulder. "Honey, don't try to compare yourself to anyone else, especially not Jill. Every psychologist in the world will tell you that once you start doing that, it will depress you because we all somehow choose our worst traits to compare with myself." Laura sobbed. But, yes, Jill is younger. Yes, that means she is younger and probably has fewer wrinkles. On the other hand, who has 15 years more experience and therefore more wisdom? Who had a busy career in the academy? Who sings better, cooks better, plays bridge better, and reads best? See, if you choose the right criteria, you can win easily. But it's not about winning or losing. It's about love. How can you love both of us? Laura's voice was rough. Because love is not a zero-sum game. What? I was not born with a limited supply of love that would run out if I did not spend it very carefully. No, the more I have to love, the more I have to give, and the more I receive in return, and the more I have for giving. You know this. We talked about this in the context of your volunteer work. There is no limit to the amount of love a person can carry or give. Science fiction writer Robert Heinlein put it this way: the more you love, the more you can love. But there's intimacy and sex and all that. Yes, of course, with all this. But there are no limits here. Well, except for the physical limitations of a 60-year-old man. Laura sobbed and magically pulled out a tissue out of nowhere to wipe her nose. We were silent for a long time as we sped down the interstate. Finally, Laura asked, "What about Tom? Does he know? If not, how do you think he will ultimately react to the news that his wife is in love with you and that you are making love?" I don't know Tom well enough to predict his reaction, but I hope it will be reasonable. He hasn't been physically intimate with her for 5 or 6 years, but Jill still loves him and has no intention of leaving him. He may know, and if she doesn't, she thinks he intuitively felt that she had a special relationship with me. She told me that she talked a lot about me to Tom. This weekend, I felt like I was under a microscope, not only from the outside, but also from him. I'm guessing he also watched Jill interact with him. Laura said, "He saw that only one bed was in use. He didn't say anything, but it was pretty obvious. He was standing in the doorway looking at the bed. He was also there when I gave Jill her toothbrush from our bathroom. Your bathroom this week." He didn't say anything or even raise an eyebrow. I shrugged at this information. "Tom is obsessed with another mistress." "What? Who?" "His business, his hedge fund. Jill says he's obsessed with this 24/7 thing. She thinks he'll get double-digit returns through sheer persistence and long hours. You know, even when they are both at home, she sees him less than a few hours a week. This day off was a mandatory event for him. Jill insisted that he come to Hazelwood, if for nothing else, then at least for his own mental health. I think she's right. All work and no play makes him a pretty sad case, and he'll lose perspective on what's important in his life, or even his business. And you just happened to be next to her. I mean, a couple of years ago when this all started." I heard sarcasm in Laura's tone. It was difficult. Looking back, I think we knew where our relationship was going, but we took it slow. We both wanted to make sure that I guess matched is the right word. Did you ever think about Tom or me when your relationship with Jill was developing? I laughed. All the time. All the time. We love you both. We didn't want to hurt you. But we also wanted our relationship to blossom. It's not that we wanted to sneak around, we just didn't want to hurt either of you. We love you. I don't know how to ask this, but are you past the honeymoon phase or are you both still in love with each other? I think we're past that stage. We see each other's weaknesses and don't tend to ignore them as easily as when we first met. The new relationship stage is probably behind us. I'd say we're on our way to a mature and long-term relationship. Relationship at the moment. It's hard to say because I'm in the middle of it all, but ask me again in a year or two. Having said that, our intimacy is as fresh as the first time. In that sense, we're still in our honeymoon month. Laura laughed and shook her head. Oh God, I don't know if I can handle this whole situation for that long, but I guess I'll have to try. It'll be interesting to watch how this all unfolds. The rest of the ride home was more relaxed, and things didn't come up again between Jill and I other than talking about some of the seminars and workshops we'd been to. On Friday, Laura started a more interesting discussion. As she left for work, she stopped by my office where I was working on my book. She said, "I expect to be back around 5 o'clock. I hope you can invite Jill here. There are a couple things I need to say and a couple questions I want to ask, okay?" Her voice was friendly, and I didn't think she could pretend to be nice and then eat her unsuspecting victim. I just nodded and said, "I'll see if she can come. Hey, have a nice day. I love you." Well, two things happened. First, I called Jill and she was able to come. Tom usually didn't get home from work until 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and Fridays were no exception. Secondly, Jill came over after lunch and we spent most of the day making love to each other. One result was that by the time we had made ourselves presentable and sat in the living room waiting for Laura to return, we were both fairly calm and sexually satisfied. Laura returned exactly at 5. I wondered if she was doing this on purpose, giving us time together. I poured each of us a glass of wine and everything seemed quite friendly and normal. After a lot of small talk, Laura finally said to both of us, "Okay, I kind of asked for this meeting because I have something I want to get off my chest and a couple of requests." Again, she spoke in a warm tone. Laura said, "I love you both very much, and part of me is really happy that you both found each other in such different ways. You are both my dearest friends, and I want to keep it that way. However, I continue to struggle with your togetherness and intimacy. I think I'm better now than I was a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure that will improve from your perspective over the next few weeks. I feel like I'm on a rocky path. My first request is that you be especially careful not to humiliate me or Tom. I don't want you to flaunt your attitude in front of others who may know that you are both married to other people. I know that you didn't do this, but it's just a reminder. My second request is that you manage your time together without me being overly aware of it, at least for now. As I did this afternoon, I tried to give you both time together by announcing when I would be back home. I trust that you made good use of your time together." We both smiled slightly and nodded. She deliberately created conditions for us. Laura continued, "If my plans change, I'll try to let you know, but I'm also not going to park at the end of the street before the posted arrival time. That means I might catch you at some point. If that happens, we'll all say, we're adults and we know what's going on, and I'm sure we can all treat each other with care and sensitivity if this situation arises. There may be some embarrassment, but let's not worry too much about it." Jill and I nodded more. "My third request may be a little difficult for both of you, especially you, Jill." Jill sat up straighter and listened intently to Laura's next words. "I don't want you to go on without telling him what's going on. I can't force you to do it, and I'm not threatening to tell him myself, but I think you owe it to your husband and ex-lover to reveal what happened and what you want to happen in the future, at least as you see it now." Jill nodded and said, "I've really been waiting for the right time. I appreciate you pushing me in this direction. I think I've been looking for the perfect time, and there probably won't be one." Now Laura nodded. Jill said, "Do you mind if I bring Jim with me when we tell him? In fact, the more I think about it, the more I want you both to be there, because after all, it touches the four of us in so many different ways. Maybe tomorrow at lunchtime?" Laura said happily. I agree. I have no objection to being present, but know that I will speak my mind on the matter. I will not issue ultimatums, and I will insist that Tom not do this either. But I think it's only fair that he knows that I struggle with the concept of an open marriage or something like that. I whispered to my wife, "Thank you." I took her hand for a moment. Jill said chokedly, "Laura, I really value your friendship and your wisdom, and I know that my presence seriously tests that friendship. I don't want our relationship to change because I'm in love with your husband and he is in love with both of us. I still want to go shopping and just talk and be friends with you if you are still willing to accept me. I know this may be a difficult task, but I wanted to say this in person so you know how I feel. I can simplify it even more by saying, Laura, I love you too." Jill had tears running down her cheeks as she looked at her friend. Earlier in the day, we had discussed how Laura was probably feeling in great detail. Within seconds, Laura was also in tears, and soon after, the two women were sitting next to each other on the sofa, hugging each other. No, this was not an embrace that could lead to passionate sex or anything like that. It was just two friends reaffirming their connection to each other. There were also sobs, as well as words of encouragement for their friendship. Laura took Jill's hand on her knee, held it with both hands, and looked between her and me. Throughout my life, I've been pretty good at separating things and multitasking. I plan to use those skills to get through all of this. I know that separation will allow me to put aside the parts that bother me while I deal with the parts that don't. Just be patient, all of us, with each other. We all need to be patient. I walked over to my chair to hug both women sitting next to each other. I kissed each of them and expressed my love for them. I think this might have been the first time Laura heard me say this to Jill, but she didn't react. After we finished this short conversation, we took a short walk around the area and then headed into the city center where there was a small Greek restaurant. Laura called Tom and asked if he wanted her to bring him something home for dinner. He wanted it, and we added it to our order while we dined in a friendly atmosphere. On Saturday morning around noon, Laura and I walked the mile to Jill and Tom's house. I was a little nervous about what would happen in the next couple of hours and could imagine that Jill was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Jill answered the door, and as I expected, she was excited and nervous. Come in," she said in a broken voice. I hugged her for support and also kissed her, and she sighed slightly, trying to relax. To my surprise, Laura hugged Jill too. I heard her say, "Relax. It won't be as hard as you think. Just know that this is the right decision. Difficult, but the right one." She stopped and asked, "How can I help with lunch?" As the women headed into the kitchen, Jill called down the stairs to the bottom floor of their home, where Tom had his home office. "Tom, get up. Jim and Laura are here, and we're going to eat in a few minutes." I could hear a slight tremor in Jill's voice that wasn't usually there, and I wondered if Tom had noticed the nervousness. Tom stood up and shook my hand. "Nice to see you again. Sorry I wasn't here to meet you. I'm about to invest in 3 new IPOs that are coming to market next week, and I've been trying to do my homework to decide how to allocate the funds we want to invest, about $50 million. I want to diversify but also maximize returns. It's a multi-dimensional task, and analytics drives me crazy, trying to balance all the trade-offs." I was impressed, but Tom didn't say anything to try to one-up me or even to make me impressed by how much money he was moving around in the investment market. No, he was a simple man expressing his own concerns about his investing skills. I knew from previous conversations that he never felt he had done enough homework for his investors. We started talking about initial public offerings, usually small companies going public for the first time. Some IPOs are small, while others, like Facebook or Google, were huge when they went public. Sometimes a stock drops like a rock, and sometimes the price per share shoots up into space and stays there. Tom told me about 3 high-tech companies going public. Laura and I were some of his investors, so I listened carefully and hoped he knew what he was doing. Jill and Laura collected us and took us out to the back deck. Tom poured us all some wine, and we spent a pleasant lunch talking about a variety of topics. Personally, I was wondering how Jill plans to start the conversation or discussion or whatever it is. I wasn't a fast runner, but I was a little in better shape than Tom. I remembered the old joke about two guys who met a bear on a walk, and the point was that I just need to run faster than you. After we had all almost finished our lunch, Jill took a deep breath and said, "Tom, I invited Jim and Laura here because there is something we want to discuss with you, to tell you. Please, just let me tell you. Situation, and then we can talk." Tom became alert and looked at his wife. In the 3 years that I knew him, he turned significantly gray at the temples and at the roots of his hair. He had a high-stress job, and it was taking its toll on him. Jill said, "I'll be direct and short because I know you love to be informed. Jim and I are in love. We've been dating for 2 years and plan to continue because we really love each other. I continue to love you and don't want our relationship to change, but I also want to continue my relationship with Jim. Laura has known about us for the last few weeks, and although she's not jumping for joy at where we've come, she seems willing to accept what we want. We will continue to be together. She will also continue to be my closest friend." Tom studied with his wife, then me, and then Laura. "This is true?" None of us were sure who the question was addressed to. I boldly said, "Yes, that's the short version. I have no intention of replacing you as Jill's husband, but I do love her, just like Laura." Tom stood up and walked to the edge of the terrace, then turned to us. "When Jill met you, she changed. She became happier and more alive. I could tell when she was with one of you because she was cheerful and beaming when I came home." He thought for a moment, and we were silent. Tom said, "I could have guessed this would happen. I haven't been a good husband to her with the way I started this business and the money pressure we were under. I think you know we haven't made love for a long time." I simply nodded. Jill said, "I don't need you to make love to me to love you. You are a wonderful person and provide for us. I love everything about you. I know you have a lot of our money invested in your business, but I agreed with, this is a long time ago. You're still a wonderful person. I'd still love you even if we were broke." She walked up to Tom and hugged him, and luckily, he hugged her back. He said, "So what do you want me to do or say?" Jill said, "You don't have to do or say anything. We just want you to know." I chimed in, "I hope you can forgive us for not telling you sooner. Our desire to avoid getting hurt seemed more important than our desire to communicate what was going on. We both promised to maintain our primary relationship and even help it grow and stay alive." Laura told Tom, "I'm starting to see that there are some positives to this unusual situation. Jim is more attentive to me now that he's been with Jill, and you seem to see a similar response. Of course, I know he's overcompensating. But I like it. Because you weren't physically intimate with Jill, I also didn't have much of a physical relationship with Jim. That was always very important to him." Laura left unsaid that Jill served this function in my life. The point was not lost on Tom. I also didn't want to get into other aspects of my life that Jill was also filling out. These aspects were much less important, and to talk about them would be to dilute what was really going on between us all. Tom said, "You stayed together during the Asheville class, didn't you?" "Yes," I guessed. I watched everyone closely that weekend. I thought something might have been going on, but that weekend confirmed it. Laura, you were upset and tried to hide it, and I could tell it was because of Jim and Jill, and not just because of your husband. Jill was happier than I had seen her in months, perhaps years, probably because she was able to spend focused time with her lover. Jim, you looked concerned and worried about me, for Jill and Laura. Looking back, I could tell you were trying to keep the peace in a potential conflict zone." He laughed a little forcedly, walking back and forth on the terrace near the table. Jill asked carefully, "Are you terribly angry with me?" Tom turned sharply to her. "It has to be, right?" He paused, but I admitted my own shortcomings in this marriage a long time ago, at least to myself. I'll reserve the right to be a little angry for a while and maybe a little insecure, I guess. I'll also need a little confidence in our marriage, despite my weaknesses and failures in him. I might blame myself for not handling what Jim could have done for you, but I admit it. I think we can apologize to each other for a while. Who knows, maybe I will become a little more attentive to you and your needs." Jill almost whispered, "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner." "No, you probably did the right thing by doing it the way you did. Somewhere I remember hearing that most romances last 2 years, at most. If yours ended, you could have just healed your wounds or something." "Something like that. And never say anything, but well, it's unique to come to a man's wife and a woman's husband and ask permission to continue more openly." Laura chimed in. "I called it an open marriage, but in this case it's limited to just the two of them." Tom continued, "So we're going to have 2 open marriages?" I said, "Yes, I hope so." "What if I got angry and started running around the sky like a witch saying no, no, no?" Jill said softly. "Please, no ultimatums. Please treat this situation as one where there are no absolutes." Tom studied Jill and was silent for a minute while we all watched. Finally, Tom said tensely, "Do you want permission or something?" Jill and I both shook our heads. She carefully said in a reserved tone, "No, we're not really asking for permission because that implies ownership or dominance. You've always said that we're equals in this marriage. We're hoping for your approval, maybe, but really we just hope for your tolerance and continued kindness to us all." Jill paused. "I also hope that you continue to love me. We've put a lot into our marriage, and I'm not at all interested in ending it. I love you very much." Tom looked up at the sky and suddenly declared, "I have a pit in my stomach. I need to go for a walk." Jill made a move to go with him, but he turned around. "No, I mean alone. Let me think about it for an hour without any other talk." He turned to Laura and me. "You two stay, please. Just give me some alone time if you can." Tom walked down the terrace and disappeared from view around the front of the house. I asked Jill, "Will he explode? Will he go into some kind of depression?" She shook her head. "No, he's all about business. I'm sure part of his mind is thinking about any impact our relationship might have on his stupid fund. I thought he'd be more obviously evil. I read where husbands call their wives all sorts of things. Nasty names, so I wouldn't be surprised by that. I think he'll be fine." She paused and said, "Let me clear away the dishes and get another bottle of wine. I need a little more Dutch courage for the rest of the conversation." Tom returned about an hour or so later. He sat down with us and poured himself another glass of wine. He said, "I have some stupid questions." Jill and I both nodded. "Should I do something, like leave the house sometime so you two can make love or something?" Jill shook her head. "No, just like we've done before. When we need to be together, we'll find a way that doesn't put pressure on you or Laura. We won't try to hide, but we won't rub it under your nose either." Laura chimed in. "I asked them to respect our dignity in all respects, not to advertise their relationship publicly, and not to impose themselves on me, or you. Over time, who knows? Maybe we'll get used to them going away together for a while, and we'll even start talking about it, but for now, as if I don't want to know that I know what might be going on." Jill said, "Laura also insisted yesterday that we tell you. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, but, well, I kept looking for the right moment." Tom said, "It's all water under the bridge. I like Laura's principles. I can think of 1 or 2 more, but for now, let's just see how it goes. I'm inclined to agree with Laura on this. I don't fully accept it, but judging I know from your faces and the way you spoke, that if we try to stop this, we'll either lose one or both of you, or force you into hiding, and I don't want either of those. So let's try." Jill kissed Tom on the cheek. "Thank you. I love you." 5 years later, Jill and I published our first book together, a non-fiction exploration of unusual American relationships and marriages based on interviews with nearly 500 people, mostly couples. Our own stories are hidden among other disguised anecdotes in our text. The book is now in its 2nd print run and may explode into something even bigger, because we've both been invited on Oprah's daytime show soon to talk about what we've discovered and our book. Jill and I also finished novels we wrote independently and published them. None of them were bestsellers, but they definitely inspired us to have more confidence in our writing abilities. Jill and I returned to Asheville to Hazelwood 2 or 3 times a year for various writing and literature workshops. We were invited to perform at the last of them. Many people there know that we are a couple, and also that we are both married to other people. This seemed to somehow enhance our mystical image among other teachers and students, especially when we talked about the book we co-authored, Unusual Marriages and Long-Term Relationships in America. Tom's hedge fund was ranked among the top 20 best funds in the country. He has now appeared in articles in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Barron's, and many other magazines. In several of them, Jill appeared as a conscientious and beautiful wife next to the newly recognized financial wizard. Tom has turned 60 and continues his hectic activities, although Jill, Laura, and I take him out for a few days of vacation here and there. I have to admit that his income stream is enviable, and he has made a lot of money for Laura and me. Laura has retired from academia except for guest lectures on special topics. She continues to study music and singing. Her bands have given many concerts and performances, plus one band has released a music CD and several tracks have been featured on iTunes. She became interested in art and painting, and I think she has a really talented approach to her work. 3 of her paintings are on permanent display in the new city library that Jill and I worked so hard to create. Jill and I are a strong couple committed to a long-term relationship, as are Laura and me, and Jill and Tom. We remain friends, although Tom and Laura's friendship remains simple and platonic. I still feel a lot of love between the 4 of us. If polyamory were legal, I would marry Jill in a heartbeat. She won my heart in many ways. I consider myself blessed to have 2 beautiful, kind, and loving women in my life and in my heart. I hope I reflect 10 times the love I feel from them. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.